Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for stopping by. I'm really glad you're here. If you're new here, my name is Becca. This channel is all about my love for spinning, knitting, weaving, crocheting, sewing, all the fiber things. I've been doing these videos now for a year, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for being here with me. If you're enjoying this fiber adventure, please consider leaving a like or a comment or subscribing to my channel. I invite you to grab whatever project you have on the go and join me. Let's make some stuff. Today I want to share with you the story of two sweaters. When I started making videos last year, I promised to share with you all the joys and the challenges that come along in our crafting journey. And this story takes us to all of those places, all the highs and the lows. And I hope you can relate, and I hope that my circuitous journey with these sweaters will give you some hope and keep you motivated as you encounter snags in your own crafting. A few years ago, I found a pattern that I just fell in love with as soon as I saw it and knew that I wanted to make it. This is an all-over cabled coat, so a long sweater that was just luxurious and beautiful. The pattern is called the Big Pretzel Coat by Adrienne Larson, and it's in this Knit Picks collection called Entwined, the Celtic Cables collection. I just loved all the patterns in this collection, and so I opted to buy the print book rather than going for the PDF download for just the one pattern. I love cable knitting. I just really enjoy the process of cable knitting, even though it's a little bit slower than plain knitting. But I love the way it looks. I love this pattern, and I just thought I have to make that. So it's a Knit Picks pattern. It calls for a Knit Picks yarn. I opted to go for a slightly different Knit Picks yarn, so I chose this Knit Picks yarn called City Tweed. Whereas the other one the pattern itself called for Swish, which was a DK Merino. This is DK Merino and Alpaca, and Tweed, because I like the little tweedy neps in it. And this color is called Brocade, this deep purple color. I just absolutely love this color. And I made sure, because I'd learned this in the past, I made sure that the yarn weight and length were the same across the two different kinds of yarn, which they were. They were matched exactly. And so I bought the pattern book, I bought the yarn, waited for it to arrive, and cast on immediately. So after casting on, I started discovering some errors or problems with how things were going with the pattern, and I went looking online, and there was an errata, so a list of the errors and corrections that was available on the website. The first problem was that the number of balls of yarn for the different sizes was actually incorrect. I ended up having to buy more yarn and hoping that it was going to be the same dye lot that I had gotten previously. So also, the sweater itself was more expensive than I had originally thought it would be, which it was already expensive because it's a very large garment. But that was okay. I ordered more yarn. I got the dye lot was fine, and it matched, and that was a good thing. But then there were other errors in the pattern. The number of repeats of the pattern itself, the cabled panel, was wrong. The number of stitches to cast on was wrong. So essentially I was having to completely redo the math to try to figure out how many stitches I needed, how many panels I needed, how to make this work. And it didn't really. So this sweater, I thought it was going okay. I went ahead and knitted it all up. It took months to knit because it's huge. It's done in panels, so it's not like I could try it on really as I went along. Got it all sewed together, and it was okay. I blocked it, and because it's so large it wouldn't fit on my blocking mats. So I had to find a big piece of cardboard to pin it to. I actually pinned it, or I actually blocked it outside for a good amount of time because the garment just was not drying. It was so heavy and wet. And this yarn that I loved so much, the dye was not set, and so it bled. And if you can imagine, I have the garment laid out on this cardboard, sort of, you know, it's not all, I didn't block the pieces individually, I blocked the thing finished. And so it was 2 layers, front and back, on top of one another, and the arms, the sleeves were folded in half. And as it bled, the purple dye soaked to the back of the garment and dyed the little tweedy neps a little bit. So these range from white to cream to black and brown. And so the back side was more purple than the front side. It was subtle. It wasn't a huge difference. But I had gone ahead and finished it. I weaved in all the ends. I sewed on the buttons. And I actually wore the thing for a few times. But it was enormous. It was huge, and it was not flattering. And I'll share some photos of the experience. I felt like I was wearing a bathrobe. The sweater that I thought I was making was super chic and sexy and cute. I did not end up with a super chic, sexy, cute sweater. It was very disappointing. Very disappointing. And my buttons wouldn't stay buttoned. The garment just was not... It was warm, but it was not a pleasure to wear. So I folded it up and I put it in my closet, and it sat in the naughty corner for me to figure out what I was going to do with it. Because I invested a lot of money, a lot of time, and a lot of my hopes and dreams in this garment that just was not really panning out. So it sat there for a while. And then one day I sort of got up my courage to figure out, okay, how do I fix this pattern? What do I need to do, given this yarn, given how I knit, to do something better with this? And so I took it out, I took all my measurements, I made a bunch of notes of how many pattern panels I wanted to make, how long did I want it to be, essentially all the edits that I would need to make additionally to this pattern to get it to turn into something that I liked. And then I put it away again, because that was a lot to think about. And I needed to, I needed to have some crafting success, and moved on to some other things which have been great in the meantime. So years go by. As sometimes happens. Years go by. So the finished big pretzel coat sat in my closet for a long time. And finally I decided, I got up the courage to frog it, to pull it out. This was a completely finished garment. It had buttons sewn on, it had all the ends woven in, everything was done. But I wasn't happy with it. So I pulled all the yarn out, and when you do that, all the yarn has all the memory from the stitches that it was in, so you have to reset the yarn. So I washed and reset the yarn, which normalized some of that bleeding of the yarn. So the white neps are now white again, which is great. And so I have a giant bag full of yarn. As you can see, I didn't actually use all the new balls that I bought. So I'm not sure how many balls really were needed for that pattern, because I bought what it called for originally, bought more, ended up with a garment that was way bigger than what it should have been, and I still didn't use it all. So clearly something is still not right there. But anyway, I had all of this yarn ready to go for when I was able to start the project again. And then we flash forward to last fall when I started thinking about another cabled sweater that I wanted to make. So this other sweater I've talked about in some of my previous videos is from this book, Viking Patterns for Knitting by Elsebeth Lavold. The sweater is called Ragna. And it is, again, an all-over cabled sweater. It is sort of medieval inspired, so it has these panels that are separate at the bottom, kind of giving it a medieval feel. I had this dream with this sweater of spinning the wool for the yarn for this project specifically. And that is not really something that I've done. I have spun yarn and turned it into sweaters, but I have never spun yarn specifically for a pattern that I wanted to make. The yarn that I spin is often the same yarn. I have sort of a default yarn, as many of us do, that is two ply, sort of heavy sport, light worsted weight, so it's roughly DK-ish. But I don't really worry about that when I'm spinning. Usually I'm just spinning the yarn and then I make the yarn into a sweater. And because my yarns all sort of are the same rough weight, I'm able to combine them in ways that I hadn't really planned when I was making the yarn. Well, this was different. I wanted to make the yarn specifically for this pattern, and I spun it up on my antique Ukrainian wheel. I have a video about that I'll link if you haven't seen it. And this yarn was supposed to be 8 wraps per inch. This is the yarn that I made. I ended up with a 3-ply yarn because 8 wraps per inch is a heavier weight than I usually make, and this yarn is 8 wraps per inch. And I thought, I was so pleased with myself because I thought that I actually made a yarn that matched a yarn that was called for in a pattern. I went ahead and did the swatch to see how my gauge was turning out, and unfortunately I was not anywhere close to getting gauge. This yarn that I had made was much bulkier than the yarn that they had apparently used in this pattern, which of course I didn't have a sample of the yarn that they used to see them side by side, which would have made it obvious that my yarn was heavier weight. So another disappointment. I had done all this work to make this yarn, which I'll make something with it, but it wasn't going to be that sweater. And then I remembered I had all of this yarn from the big pretzel coat project that was just sitting in my stash, and it is a pile of yarn. So I went ahead and pulled it out and did a swatch. First swatch was looking good. Went ahead and knit up one of the knit panels, or knit up one of the cabled panels from the Ragna pattern, and it was getting gauge. It looked good. I love how the tweed looks in the cables. It sort of makes the cables a little bit more subtle, but I like the effect that it gets. And so again, this Ragna pattern is another one of these one size fits most, and I have another video talking about how that is not always, doesn't always work for all of us. So I adjusted my needle size a little bit to give it a couple more inches of ease because I wanted that loose feel of the sweater. And so that's what I'm doing. I'm making the Ragna sweater out of the yarn that I bought for the big pretzel coat project. So I'm now making the Ragna sweater with the Knit Picks City Tweed, and here is my progress so far. I am about a third of the way up the back panel. You can see the panels at the bottom. They are wanting to curl a little bit, so we'll see how that behaves once it's blocked. If it wants to curl, I'll just sew the panels together and have it just be straight across. But I really like how the cables are turning out. I like how the tweed looks in the yarn. The yarn feels amazing. I really like the yarn. For some reason it just wasn't working in the other pattern. Same with the other yarn that I made. I really love the yarn. It just wasn't working out with the pattern. So it could be that I've just been struggling, you know, with these particular yarns to figure out what they want to be. But anyway, let's go do some cable knitting and just enjoy the process. That's it for this video. I hope this story encourages you to keep at it when you run into some hurdles with your crafting, and that you find those ways to make something beautiful. I'd love to hear your crafting redemption stories if you'd like to share those with me in the chat, and share those with all of us. I hope that you have enjoyed this story, and I want to thank you for spending some of your creative time with me. I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!